One does not normally connect the wildlings with war machines, but Frozen Shore Chariots are surprisingly effective. Made of wood and bone and hauled by massive wolfhound hybrids bred for strength and ferocity, chariots pull two men and an assortment of weaponry, not only towards the enemy, but often crashing straight through even hardened ranks. That said, use them with caution, for a chariot's primary weakness lies in becoming bogged down. Thanks for stopping by Big Top Gaming. My name is Brian, and in this video we're going to be talking about one of the recent releases for the Free Folk for A Song of Ice and Fire, the miniature game by Cool Mini or Not. So the Frozen Shore Chariot has only a single sculpt within the box, but it does come with two of the models for this. So not, I complained a little bit about the Hrakars not having like two different sculpts, but and I probably would make the same complaint here, but regardless, just getting two of these in one box is decent enough. Coming in at the low cost of 4 points, we get a movement of 6. Then the Frozen Short Chariot brings the melee attack called Deadly Impact that hits on 4s and then rolls 4 dice, and that's all it is because this is a war machine, right? So for a defense save, we get a 5+, and morale is a 5+ as well. So not the most offensive thing in the universe, but still a decent morale stat, so we won't be losing wounds from that. They bring a good amount of rules with them too. They have the order Swift Retreat, so this triggers after an enemy completes a melee attack on this unit. The unit performs 1 retreat action. There's also the Chariot rule, which gives them 6 wounds, and then at the start of the unit's activation, it can perform a maneuver action much like cavalry or dragons can. The final rule is on their melee weapon Deadly Impact. When charging, it gains Sundering, Vicious, and deals +1 hit for each of the defender's remaining ranks. So the Frozen Shore Chariot provides us with an extremely cheap unit at 4 points that's fairly aggressive. It does always want to be charging, so don't forget your ABCs there. But because we don't want to be stuck in combat hitting on 4s with 4 dice that do nothing. So the Deadly Impact programs you to make sure that you're using this unit to charge all the time, and then even the flavor text on the back of the card tells you how not to use them. You don't want them bogged down in combat. So I think the Frozen Shore Chariot is an extremely unique piece for the Free Folk. They don't have access to cavalry specifically right now. I mean, they'll get those bears, but they're pretty slow. But this one's a very quick unit. It's unfortunate that it's a war machine. I get why it's a war machine, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Otherwise, like I'm super happy that the box comes with 2 of these because they're just really good, and fairly often if you have one in a list, you're probably going to want to have 2. So one of the challenges that comes with talking about this unit is that it is a war machine. Even though it kind of functions more like cavalry, it is legitimately a war machine, so there won't be any attachments or anything that we can put in here. Instead, we can try and talk about some of the other synergies that might come along with this unit. And first, I'm just going to focus on a couple NCUs, and the first one is maybe cheating a little bit, and that's going to be Lady Val. Not only does she allow you to get an extra movement, and at speed 6 that's really valuable considering they get to move another 6 when they activate, but they also have the ability to retreat if someone isn't if someone's not wanting, if they're trying to bog them down and they're not using their Swift Retreat, or they're not attacking you to allow you to use Swift Retreat, then you can use Lady Val to pull them out of combat if the maneuver position's gone on the tactics board, and then get that vulnerable token to make their attack even more dangerous. So I think she's a kind of the low-hanging fruit of NCUs that work with them. But then we also have Ygritte, which I do appreciate with them as well, where she can, if she's influencing them, they get +1 speed, which is really good for them as they have that cavalry move. So they'd get the 7 and then can go another 7 or 14 or whatever it is. And then they ignore that hindering and rough keywords, which you always want to make sure that you're getting your charge bonus with these guys, because hitting on 4s isn't super great. But then on the flip side, if your opponent also has some far-reaching cavalry, you can change this to lower the efficacy or the maneuverability of that. Like I can see if Ygritte starts influencing something like Champions of the Stag, they're going to be really not happy moving at a speed of 3. So even speed 6 cavalry going to 5 or 5 going to 4 is really good. And then they have all those disorderly bonuses too. So I think that Egret can do some decent work with the Frozen Shore Chariot. Now, it's weird. I want to talk about some attachments, but only because they can, help these guys out. Because I think with Free Folk, we all understand it's about coordination. You have to be working together with all of your units. And one of the attachments that I think can really help this unit out, if you end up getting something to connect first, would be the Champion of Bone. So he brings the rule Intimidating Presence that just states enemies engaged with this unit suffer -1 to morale test rolls and +1 wound from failing panic tests. With the maneuverability of the Frozen Shore Chariot, it's pretty easy to get them in the side. So if you have something like a unit of Free Folk Raiders or any other thing that's kind of tying up some units and you've got these chariots running around doing stuff, you can make sure that that unit is engaged with your enemy, and then you'll be hitting them on the side or the back, even depending on how late the game is. And then you'll be getting that extra -1 on top of Vicious, whatever penalty you have from the flank or rear, and then also causing them to take another wound from a failed panic test. So it's a really hard 1-2 punch when you've got a Champion of Bone in a unit that's teaming up with the Frozen Shore Chariot. So the other fun thing here is just, you can... Free Folk Raiders really have an interesting spot in Free Folk right now, at least not right now, but I mean, like, for peppering in attachments, because they lower the point of attachments by 1, so you're often getting free attachments, and that allows you to do some of these kind of shenanigans. And one of them is going to be Gang Up, that's on the raid leader. So all friendly units melee attacks gain +1 to hit and +1 attack die on enemies that are engaged with this unit and at least one other friendly unit. So if you've got your raiders or something connecting first, then you're making the Frozen Shore Chariot hit on 3s and then throwing 5 dice and then whatever kind of extra hits you would get from the remaining ranks. So I think that the raid leader is another easy one to say, it helps out the Frozen Shore Chariot, since you're going to be taking things you're going to be taking on enemies in pairs. So when it comes to commanders, there's one that I really wish had a few alterations just to work a little bit better with these. I really wanted Rattleshirt to function well with the chariots, because it seemed like all of his trophies really did good work with them. But unfortunately, he specifically calls out cavalry and infantry, so he doesn't have any synergy with them in terms of these trophies. So it's a bummer. I really wanted him to be in there as a go-to for him, but it just didn't shake out that way. And I'm not sure if it was a balance thing, like maybe Cool Mini or Not had this idea of what they wanted to get out of the chariots. Maybe in playtesting it was a little too powerful that the chariots were able to get Rattleshirt's trophies, but I would maybe like to try a game where I do get to play with Rattleshirt and put the trophies on there, just to see if that's kind of the logic of why he doesn't allow War Machines to get trophies. But for commanders that do work for them, we have a couple that are really decent. The first one's going to be Harma the Vanguard commander. Now, as an attachment, she just gets her enhanced mobility so she can move a little bit faster in the unit, which is nice if you're wanting to try and keep up with the Frozen Shore Chariots. But the reason why you want to keep up with them is because of the order that she brings, called Superior Flanking. So when a friendly unit in long range performs an attack, before rolling the attack dice, if attacking the defender in the flank or the rear, the defender becomes panicked and vulnerable. So with these guys having Sundering and Vicious when they're charging, you having panicked and vulnerable is perfect. So it's a little bit more effort to go through than Warcry. Maybe it's about the same if you're planning on being in the flanks anyways with this unit, but it's just a great way for the Frozen Shore Chariots to do extra work. Now for her commander cards, we have a couple that are going to help these folks get it, the free folks, right? But no, they're going to help the Frozen Shore Chariots out quite a bit. The first one we come across is Hit and Run. So this triggers after a friendly unit completes a melee attack. If that unit began the turn engaged with the defender, they perform one retreat action. If it targets Harma's unit, each enemy it disengages from becomes weakened. Sorry about that. I was like kind of processing that as I was reading it. But the bummer about this is that you don't want to have the Frozen Shore Chariot engaged at the start of that turn after they've completed their melee attack. So I don't think that this is a really good card to synergize with them at all, but it is a good card in general for Harma for other units. So probably not going to be wanting this on the Frozen Shore Chariot unless they are really bogged down and you just have to do the melee attack to get out. It's almost like it's your last ditch effort to get them out of melee if your opponent's keeping them tied up and Lady Val isn't there to help you out. The next one is Fainting Maneuver, and this one triggers when a friendly unit successfully charges, if they contacted the front of the enemy, instead align them to any flank, and if they contacted the flank of the enemy, instead align them to the rear. So this is just another amazing card well, it's the first amazing card because the other one wasn't so great for the Frozen Shore Chariot. So they typically, at least in my mind's eye, how I would want to play them, they're going to be getting flanks often, and if you're in a position where you can't get the flank, then they can just kind of shift to those flanks to get the extra modifiers for the panic and armor saves, because these guys, with the amount of dice they throw and vicious plus sundering, you're gonna be doing a lot of work to your opponent's unit if you're getting the side bonus or the rear bonus. Like, it's not, depending on how many ranks they have left, it's not really uncommon that you could see these Frozen Shore Chariots being ways to clean up units that have taken a couple wounds here and there. The only real awkward thing with Feigning Maneuver in them is that the War Machine bases are very long, so you have to kind of divide and conquer, so to speak, and split your opponent's army out so that you can actually fit the War Machines in the flank or the rear. Next up is Swift Reposition. This triggers at the start of any turn. Target one friendly combat unit, and it shifts 2 inches. If it targets Harma's unit, they perform a 3-inch maneuver instead. So this is just another way to get some nice threat extension. It might be the little bit that you need to get into your opponent's flank. It's just like I said, threat extender on something that wants to utilize its massive threat to get into opponents. So another commander that is pretty decent with the Frozen Shore Chariots is going to be Tormund Giantsbane Thunderfist. His attachment card his attachment card works with them, just not quite like Harma would. He has the order Overrun, so when this unit surges forth, instead of maneuvering, this unit pivots and then makes 1 charge action. Furious Charge is another rule that Tormund has where enemies successfully charged by this unit become vulnerable. So as an attachment, you can think of Tormund kind of pairing up with a Frozen Shore Chariot and running around in a really aggressive unit. The game has kind of lost a little bit of its oomph or punch for being able to just kind of one-shot some units with melee only or with just one type of attack action. But with Tormund going in after a Frozen Shore Chariot's done some work, he gets to put vulnerable on them, and if you put him in the right unit and the Frozen Shore Chariot's done what you would expect it to, he should be able to get rid of that unit and then charge and surge forth into something else. So I think that pairing him up with a Frozen Shore Chariot works really well in terms of trying to kind of start this rolling crescendo of charges just coming out of left field, and then once Tormund charges into something else, then the next round the Frozen Shore Chariot can follow up and they can kind of just take turns going into things. It's really, I think it's a neat, in my head when I see the charges happening like this, it just seems really fun and cool to watch, really free folky, I guess. So for commander cards, we have Rush of Aggression that triggers when a friendly unit is performing a charge action before rolling charge distance dice. This unit automatically counts as rolling a 6 on all charge distance dice, and their melee attacks gain critical blow. After this attack has been completed, unless the attacker is Tormund's unit, they become vulnerable. So this is a really great card for the Frozen Shore Chariots. You can take those risks. You don't have to worry about taking those risky long bomb charges. Like if someone is, 11 inches away from you or something like that, you can easily make the charge, or the full 12 inches, if they're trying to respect your threat ranges and try and make you fish for those 33 or 16% charges. Rush of Aggression just makes sure you get there, and you also get critical blow, which the Frozen Shore Chariots really appreciate. The more The more hits they can generate, the better. Not that it's, you're fishing. I don't think you need to fish for sixes with this unless you're feeling really risky. But a good ability, or a good ability to add to them nonetheless. The fact that they become vulnerable afterwards isn't the biggest deal in the world. They've got that 5-up save with 6 wounds, and if your opponent's throwing dice at them, you're retreating after swift retreat anyways, so I don't think that's the biggest downfall for Rush of Aggression on the Chariots. Next we have Counter Assault. This triggers after an enemy completes a melee attack. Target one friendly combat unit other than the defender. They perform one attack or charge action on the attacker. If it targets Tormund's unit, they can reroll any attack and charge distance dice for this action. So Counter Assault works for the Frozen Shore Chariots because they do have that insane threat range, but it can also help if your opponent's hitting the Frozen Shore Chariot and Tormund's just kind of sitting there waiting to get his charge on. It's just I keep just thinking about these guys running around in pairs and doing a lot of work together and really synergizing off of all these cards and making, because your opponent will want to stop Tormund and he'll want to, or your opponent will want to stop Tormund and your opponent will also want to try and stop those Frozen Shore Chariot. So just having Counter Assault hanging around means that you're going to be very disruptive in how they're going to try and do things. The last card is Devastating Impact, so this triggers when a friendly unit is performing a charge action before rolling the charge distance dice. Enemies successfully charged by this unit become panicked and vulnerable, and if it targets Tormund's unit, they can reroll any charge distance dice. So, again, another great card for the Frozen Shore Chariot. So, Tormund really kind of accentuates their always charging lifestyle, and Devastating Impact gives out the 2 tokens that you really want with just about any unit with Vicious these days, but with Sundering 2 having Vulnerable means that it's going to be unlikely that your opponent's going to be passing armor saves unless they already have a really low defense save. So this is another, if you're wanting to get the reroll out of the charge with Tormund, he doesn't need to use the tokens that go on them. I would always say that it's probably better to have the Frozen Shore Chariot do it so that your opponent doesn't get many opportunities to try and remove those tokens before you get to use them. But if you want to get Tormund in first and then clean up with the Frozen Shore Chariot, like if you just had some kind of activation order that you had to do, maybe you're triggering Counter Assault and then kind of waterfalling these things through. There's a lot of different, the 2 different ways you can do this if you're thinking about the Frozen Shore Chariot being a vanguard, so to speak, for Tormund's unit, but Devastating Impact is really good for them too. So overall, the Frozen Shore Chariots are, I've talked about them a lot in terms of just being aggressive units that work with these other commanders. I think maybe in a mag list too, I think I have one in there just so that they can be a little bit more harassy and help giants finish jobs too, or start it to make it easier for the giant to finish the job. So them being at the price point they are is extremely attractive for them. I think if they were a little bit more expensive, like if they went up to 5 points, I probably wouldn't be so hyped on them. But I have one box myself, and after kind of playing around with some lists and building some things, I think I might want to get a second one. I don't think I would meme it up with 4. It's not a bad idea, but I could definitely see myself putting 3 into a list pretty easily. I think that the Frozen Shore Chariot adds a lot more flexibility to the Free Folk unit and a little bit more of a intimidating presence for some of those really wide infantry armies where you're just kind of throwing out a bunch of raiders and seeing what happens. I think that as time goes on with Free Folk releases, we kind of start to see the vision of Free Folk coming together a little bit more clearly, because I think in the early days of Free Folk, it was very difficult to see what direction the army was going in, but now we're just getting all sorts of cool, unique things. Like we've got the giant commanders, or commander, even though I think they probably could have squeezed for another commander out of 1/1. But, we've got the commander giants, We've got the Frozen Shore Chariots are very unique in the game outside of Hrakars, who are basically kind of doing the same thing, but they're not war machines. And then, we've got the bears on the horizon too. So free folk are getting a lot of unique tools, and the Frozen Shore Chariot is definitely one of those unique tools that I think we've been wanting for a really long time, and I think that it's a perfect addition to anyone's free folk army. So thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I'm always excited to talk about free folk. They were definitely one of my favorite armies. Well, I think they're still probably one of my favorite armies. It's just that I don't play them that often because they're in foam right now instead of on the shelf, so they kind of take a little bit of effort to get together. But the Frozen Shore Chariot's just really neat. I love it. And the more things that come out for free folk, the more I just want to keep putting them back on the table. So let me know in the comment section below how you would use your free folk Frozen Shore Chariots. How you're folding them into your lists. Do you find any fun synergies that I didn't go over in this video? I'm just really excited to see kind of what people are thinking of these, because I don't think I've heard many. I don't think I've heard a whole lot of talk about them, and I just think that they're a really strong tool for this faction.